The air in the banquet hall smelled of lavender and lies. And on my 18th birthday, I stood at the edge of my own unraveling. My name is Elias Torres, an Omega born into a world that demanded I bend. And tonight, my family had sold my future to a stranger. As the chandelier light glinted off the polished silverware, I felt the weight of 1,000 eyes pinning me to a fate I hadn't chosen. Seattle's elite filled the room, their tailored suits and glittering dresses a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside me. My mother, her smile sharp as a blade, adjusted the sapphire cufflinks on my wrists, whispering, "This is for the family. Elias, don't ruin it." Her words were a leash, tightening with every syllable. I was to marry Cashin Holt, a 26-year-old alpha from a powerful Oregon dynasty, known for his cold demeanor and ruthless ambition. I'd met him once, at a gala 3 months ago. He'd barely spoken, his blue eyes scanning me like I was a contract to be signed, not a person. The Omegaverse system in our corner of America wasn't just tradition, it was law. Alphas ruled, betas served, and Omegas like me were bartered for alliances, wealth, or power. My family, once prominent, had fallen into debt, and I was their currency to climb back into grace. Cashin's family, the Holts, owned half the timber industry in the Pacific Northwest, and this marriage would secure my parents' place among the elite again. My dreams of art, of freedom, of choosing my own path were irrelevant. As the officiant droned on about unity and duty, I stole a glance at Cashin. He stood tall, his black tuxedo sharp against the warm glow of the hall. His face was a mask, unreadable, but his sensitor and steel hit me like a wave, stirring something primal I fought to ignore. Omegas were wired to respond to alphas, but I refused to let biology dictate my heart. Still, my pulse betrayed me, racing as he stepped closer for the ceremonial vow. "Elias Torres," he said, his voice low and clipped. "Do you accept this bond?" His eyes locked onto mine, and for a fleeting second, I thought I saw something flicker regret, maybe, or curiosity, but it vanished as quickly as it came. "I do," I forced out, the words tasting like ash. The crowd applauded, but it felt like a cage door slamming shut. The ring on my finger, a heavy silver band with the Holt crest, burned against my skin. I was his now, legally and biologically, bound by a system I despised. The reception blurred by in a haze of forced smiles and champagne toasts. Cashin barely spoke to me, his attention claimed by business associates and alphas congratulating him on his acquisition. I stood alone by the balcony, staring out at the Seattle skyline, the Space Needle glowing against the night. My sketchbook, hidden in my jacket, was my only anchor. I'd always drawn to escape, capturing moments of beauty in a world that felt so ugly. But tonight, even that felt futile. "Running already?" Cashin's voice cut through the silence. I turned to find him leaning against the balcony railing, his posture relaxed but his eyes sharp. Up close, he was even more striking, tall, broad-shouldered, with a jawline that could cut glass. But there was no warmth in him, only calculation. "I'm not running," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. "Just breathing." He tilted his head, studying me. "You don't want this, do you?" I shot back, surprising myself. His brow twitched, but he didn't answer. Instead, he stepped closer, his scent overwhelming, making my knees weak despite my resolve. "You don't know me, Cashin, and I don't know you. So why are we doing this?" "Duty," he said simply, but there was a crack in his voice, a hint of something buried. "It's what keeps the world turning." "Not my world," I whispered, turning away. I didn't expect him to understand. Alphas like him thrived in this system, while Omegas like me were crushed beneath it. The next morning, we left for the Holt estate in Oregon, a sprawling mansion nestled in the misty forests of the Cascade Mountains. The drive was silent, the tension between us thick enough to choke on. I stared out the window, sketching the passing trees in my mind, trying to anchor myself in something familiar. Cashin drove, his hands steady on the wheel, his face as unreadable as ever. The estate was a fortress of stone and glass, surrounded by towering pines and a private lake that shimmered under the gray sky. Inside, it was all polished wood and cold elegance, a reflection of the man who owned it. My room, separate from Cashin's, thank God, was on the second floor, with a view of the lake. I unpacked my sketchbooks first, laying them out like a shield against this new life. That night, at dinner, Cashin finally spoke. "You'll have duties here," he said, cutting into his steak with surgical precision. "Public appearances, events, supporting the family's image. You're a Holt now." "I'm not a Holt," I said quietly, pushing my food around my plate. "I'm Elias." His fork paused midair, and for a moment, I thought he might argue. Instead, he leaned back, his blue eyes narrowing. "You're angry." "Wouldn't you be?" I met his gaze, refusing to back down. "I didn't choose this. I didn't choose you." Something flickered in his expression, hurt, maybe, or recognition. But before he could respond, a sharp knock at the door interrupted us. A beta servant entered, bowing. "Sir, there's a call from Portland. It's urgent." Cashin excused himself, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I wandered to the window, staring at the lake's glassy surface. In that moment, I made a vow. I wouldn't let this marriage define me. I'd find a way to carve out my own space, my own freedom, even if it meant defying Cashin and the entire Omegaverse system. Days at the Holt estate settled into a tense rhythm. Mornings were spent in solitude, sketching by the lake or wandering the forest trails, where the scent of pine dulled Cashin's lingering presence in my senses. Afternoons meant public duty charity galas, business dinners, smiling for cameras as the perfect Omega spouse. I hated every second, but I played the part, if only to keep my family off my back. Cashin was rarely around, consumed by his work managing the Holt empire. When we did cross paths, our conversations were clipped, formal, like two strangers sharing a prison cell. Yet, there were moments, small, fleeting ones, that unsettled me. Like when I caught him watching me sketch from across the room, his expression unreadable but intense. Or when he left a coat on my chair during a chilly evening event, wordlessly ensuring I stayed warm. These gestures confused me, hinting at a man beneath the cold alpha facade. But I didn't trust them. Alphas were trained to manipulate, to control. I wouldn't let my guard down. One evening, after a particularly grueling gala in Portland, I found a hidden nook in the estate's library, a cozy corner with dusty books and a view of the starry sky. I was sketching the lake, lost in the flow of charcoal on paper, when Cashin appeared, loosening his tie. "You're always drawing," he said, not unkindly. "It's how I survive," I replied, not looking up. "What do you do to survive?" He didn't answer right away, settling into an armchair across from me. "I work," he said finally. "It's what I've always done." "That sounds lonely," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. His eyes flickered, and for the first time, I saw something raw in them, something that looked like pain. "It is," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. "But it's what I know." The air between us shifted, charged with something I couldn't name. I wanted to push, to ask why he'd agreed to this marriage, but fear held me back. Instead, I handed him my sketchbook, a reckless impulse. "What do you see?" I asked. He studied the drawing, a rough outline of the lake, with shadows of the trees dancing on the water. "It's alive," he said, his voice soft. "Like you see things I don't." I didn't know how to respond, so I didn't. But that night, something cracked open between us, a fragile thread of understanding I wasn't ready to trust. The next morning, I overheard a conversation that shattered my fragile hope. Cashin's mother, Vivian Holt, a formidable alpha in her own right, was visiting. I was in the hallway, out of sight, when I heard her sharp voice. "You need to control him, Cashin. Omegas are volatile. If he steps out of line, it'll ruin our reputation." "He's not a problem," Cashin said, his tone icy. "He's doing his part." "For now," Vivian snapped. "But don't let him get ideas. You're an alpha. Act like one." I slipped away before they noticed me, my chest tight with anger and betrayal. I'd been a fool to think Cashin might be different. He was just another alpha, playing the game, and I was a pawn, determined to reclaim some control. I started exploring the estate's grounds more boldly, seeking places where I could be myself. One afternoon, I stumbled across a hidden clearing in the forest, where wildflowers bloomed in vibrant patches. It felt like a secret, a place untouched by the Holt legacy. I began visiting daily, sketching and dreaming of a life where I wasn't bound by duty. One evening, Cashin found me there. I was sitting cross-legged, sketching a cluster of lupins. When he appeared, his tie loosened and his sleeves rolled up. "You're hard to track down," he said, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Maybe I don't want to be found," I said, closing my sketchbook. But he sat beside me, uninvited. And for once, he didn't feel like a threat. "Why do you come here?" he asked, his voice quieter than usual. "It's mine," I said simply. "The one place that feels like it belongs to me." He nodded, as if he understood. And for a moment, we sat in silence, the only sound the rustle of leaves in the wind. Then he spoke, his words catching me off guard. "I didn't want this either, Elias. The marriage, the expectations. But I didn't have a choice." I stared at him, my heart pounding. "Then why did you agree?" "Because I'm the eldest," he said, his voice heavy. "My family depends on me. If I don't play my part, everything falls apart." For the first time, I saw him not as an alpha, but as a man trapped by the same system that bound me. It didn't erase my anger, but it planted a seed of empathy I couldn't ignore. The weeks that followed were a tightrope walk between resentment and curiosity. Cashin and I circled each other, our interactions a mix of guarded conversations and fleeting moments of connection. He started joining me in the clearing some evenings, sitting quietly while I sketched. He never pushed, never demanded, and that restraint unnerved me more than his coldness ever had. I wanted to hate him, to keep him at arm's length, but he was making it impossible. One night, after a tense dinner with his family, where Vivian's sharp comments about my role cut deeper than usual, I fled to the clearing, my emotions a tangled mess. Cashin found me there, his presence steady despite the storm in my chest. "You don't have to listen to her," he said, sitting beside me. "She doesn't speak for me." "Then who does?" I snapped, my voice breaking. "Because I don't know who you are, Cashin. One minute you're this untouchable alpha, and the next you're this." I gestured at him, at the man who sat in the grass with me, his guard down. He looked away, his jaw tight. "I don't know who I am either. Sometimes," he admitted. "I've spent my life being what everyone expects. The perfect alpha, the perfect heir. But with you," he trailed off, his eyes meeting mine, raw and unguarded. "You make me want to be something else." My breath caught, and for a moment, the world narrowed to just us. I wanted to believe him, to trust the vulnerability in his voice. But fear held me back. "I'm not your redemption, Cashin," I said, my voice trembling. "I'm just trying to survive." "I know," he said softly, "but maybe we can survive together." Those words lingered, haunting me as the days passed. I started noticing things about him, the way his hands fidgeted when he was nervous, the way he lingered near me during events, protective but never overbearing. I hated how much I noticed, how much I cared. Then came the gala in Seattle, a glittering event meant to solidify the Holt-Torres alliance. I wore a tailored suit, my mother's sapphire cufflinks glinting under the lights. But I felt like a prop in someone else's story. Cashin, as always, was the center of attention, shaking hands and charming investors. But when an older alpha, drunk and leering, cornered me with suggestive comments, Cashin appeared like a storm. "Back off," he growled, his voice low and dangerous. The alpha paled and scurried away. But Cashin's anger lingered, his scent sharp and electric. He turned to me, his eyes softening. "Are you okay?" I nodded, my heart racing. "You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did," he said, his voice fierce. "You're not theirs. You're—" He stopped, as if catching himself. But the unspoken word hung between us, mine. That night, back at the estate, I couldn't sleep. I wandered to the library, where I found Cashin poring over old photos. He looked up, startled, then gestured me over. "These are my parents," he said, showing me a faded picture of a young couple, smiling in a way he never did. They weren't always like this. Power changes people. I sat beside him, our shoulders brushing. "Do you think it'll change you?" "I hope not," he said, his voice barely audible. "But I'm scared it already has." The vulnerability in his words broke something in me. I reached for his hand, a reckless move, and he didn't pull away. Our fingers intertwined, and for the first time, I didn't feel like an Omega or a pawn, just Elias, holding on to someone who might understand. Our connection grew in stolen moments, quiet evenings in the clearing, late-night talks in the library, his hand brushing mine during public events. I started to see Cashin not as the cold alpha I'd feared, but as a man fighting his own battles. He told me about his childhood, about the pressure to be perfect, about the brother he'd lost to a car accident years ago, a wound that still bled. I shared my dreams of art school, of a life where I could create without fear. With every conversation, the walls between us crumbled, and I began to feel something dangerous, hope. But the world we lived in didn't allow for hope. Vivian's visits grew more frequent, her disapproval of me sharper. "He's too independent," she told Cashin one evening, not knowing I was listening. "You need to put him in his place, or he'll ruin you." Cashin's response was quiet but firm. "He's not the problem, Mother. Your expectations are." I slipped away, my heart pounding. He was defending me, but at what cost? The Holt family was a machine, and I was a cog that didn't fit. I started noticing whispers at events, rumors that I was unruly, that Cashin was weak for tolerating me. The pressure was building, and I feared it would break us. One night, in the clearing, I confronted him. "They're coming for us, aren't they? Your family, the alphas, everyone who wants us to fit their mold." Cashin's jaw tightened. "Let them try. I won't let them touch you." His words were a vow, but they terrified me. I didn't want him to fight for May, wanted us to fight together. "Then let's run," I said, the words spilling out before I could stop them. "We don't have to stay here, Cashin. We can leave, start over, be who we want to be." He stared at me, his eyes a storm of conflict. "I can't," he said finally. "My family, my responsibilities. I can't walk away." "Then what are we doing?" I demanded, tears burning my eyes. "Pretending we can have something real in a world that won't let us." He stepped closer, his hands cupping my face, his touch gentle but desperate. "I don't know," he whispered, "but I know I don't want to lose you." He kissed me then, and the world fell away. It was fierce and tender, a collision of everything we'd been holding back. I kissed him back, pouring every ounce of fear and longing into it, my hands tangled in his hair. For that moment, we weren't Alpha and Omega, just two people who'd found each other in a broken world. But reality crashed back too soon. A scandal broke the next day, photos of us in the clearing, leaked to the press, with headlines screaming about the rebellious Omega and the disgraced Alpha. Vivian was livid, accusing me of dragging the family name through the mud. Cashin stood his ground, refusing to apologize. But the damage was done. The world was watching, and they wanted blood. The fallout was brutal. Events were canceled, investors pulled back, and Vivian's wrath was unrelenting. She demanded Cashin fix the situation, implying I should be sent away, controlled, or worse. But Cashin refused, his defiance a quiet rebellion that shook me to my core. He was choosing me, even if it meant losing everything. One night, as the estate slept, he came to my room, his face pale but determined. "We need to talk," he said, closing the door. "I've been thinking about what you said. About running." My heart leaped, but I stayed cautious. "And I can't abandon my family," he said, his voice breaking. "But I can't keep you in a cage either. If you want to go, I'll help you. I'll make sure you're safe." I stared at him, torn between love and fear. "And what about you?" "I'll figure it out," he said, but the pain in his eyes told me he wouldn't. He'd stay, chained to his duties, while I chased freedom alone. "No," I said, stepping closer. "If we're doing this, we're doing it together. I'm not leaving you behind." His breath hitched, and he pulled me into his arms, holding me like I was the only thing keeping him grounded. "You deserve better than this," he whispered. "So do you," I said, my voice fierce. "We deserve each other." We made a plan that night, reckless and desperate. We'd leave for a small town in Northern California, far from the Holt Empire, where we could start over. Cashin had enough saved to get us by, and I had my art, my dreams. It wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours. The night we left, the estate was quiet, the stars bright above the lake. We took only what we could carry, me sketchbooks, his essentials, and drove south, the road stretching before us like a promise. The world would judge us. The system would hunt us. But in that moment, with his hand in mine, I felt free. Years later, in a small coastal town, we built a life. I sold my art at local markets, and Cashin worked as a carpenter, his hands calloused but his smile real. The Omegaverse laws still loomed, but we were careful, living quietly, loving fiercely. We weren't just surviving any more way we're living. On my 21st birthday, as we stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, Cashin pulled me close, his scent still cedar and steel. But now it felt like home. "You changed everything," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "So did you," I replied, my heart full. We'd defied a world that tried to break us, and in doing so, we'd found something unbreakable, us.